Friday, February 6th, 2 p.m. I call the meeting of the Land Use Working Group to order. Yes, we have one person online, so we have to do a roll call here of participants. Let me just quickly do this. So, Rob Almeida here, Keith Berkman, present. Paul Böhm, present. Matt Bogger is, I think, excused. Mary Hartman. Here. Judith Long. Here. Tracy Morano.
Present. Sorry, I have to be online.
No problem. Mark Martinez. Here. Linda Miller is excused. Sven Weber here. So we have a quorum. Any public comments? None. Let's go to the approval of the minutes. They were part of the package. Any comments? Additions? Changes? Stories? None. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of January 9th? I second. Okay, let's do a roll call again. Rob Almeida? Yes. Keith Berkman? Aye. Paul Böhm? Aye. Mary Hartman? Aye. Judith Long? Aye. Tracy Morano?
Aye.
Mark Martinez? Approved. Sven Weber? Aye. Okay. With that speed, we're done very quickly. So next one is presentations from subgroups on findings. So this time we do it a little bit different. And last time we went all around and every group was presenting. Now we are focusing on one group today. Depending how the time goes, we might be able to start with a second group, which then that would be fire and police. So we have to see how it works and how we are on time. Unfortunately, Linda and Matt Bogger cannot be here, but we're having Rob here. I have to say, before you start, Rob, when I got this report, I was just blown away what they did there. This was a lot of work. So thank you for doing all this work and going in that much of the detail. So this was amazing.
Look, Linda deserves a lot of credit, and I'm sure Shannon's helped out with it. So it was definitely a team effort. We, spent a lot of time getting data and compiling it and putting everything together. So.
Okay, so I give the floor to you, and you decided how you got us through findings.
So basically, through a multitude of meetings, we went through and try to find locations that are suitable for the location of DPW from its current location at Kai's Road, or as well as looking at what would be involved with upgrading the existing facility and just throwing, those ideas around on how that would work and, the potential impacts. We've looked at a lot of different data. Part of it was obviously size, location in town where it was, if there was a cost with purchasing the land or not. Also what the offsets were if we moved from Kai's, what opportunities that would open up. And we compiled a few locations around town. We started with Kai's, we added MCI. Bedford Street was on the list, and we've looked at other locations as well as 2229 Main. Looked at a spot on Virginia Road and a couple other locations and narrowed it down to, recommending a handful of locations. So our main suggestions are, and the other locations are 755 Walden Street as well.
Is that the landfill?
Yes. Sorry.
Should I
Again,
share something on the screen?
I think we could run through the report. I could probably pull up Let me find something here. Sorry, I apologize. Should have had a bit more prepared for this.
I can share your report and you tell
That'd be
me where
great.
to go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just an initial quick, did you ever agree upon a size and acreage that you guys want?
We did, we looked at, initially, we were targeting around 14 acres, Alan, you can chime in. But we've downsized to about 9 is about where we're at.
And are your recommendations, they still include keeping water and sewer and DPW together?
Yes, they do. Most of them, we figured that keeping them together would be, the best option. One single campus versus, obviously having, if we have some other offsite storage or whatnot, but the primary campus being in one area. And that, I'm sorry. Scroll through here. So one of the things we looked at with MCI was obviously the wastewater plant. And the existing structures that are there. In addition, with the wastewater plant, we know there will be a buffer zone. What size it is, we don't know yet. That's gonna be probably one of the biggest drivers of, what can be used for DPW versus a commercial setting versus a residential setting. Given that the existing structures that are there are in really good shape, especially the warehouse and the 2 buildings that are, it was L and was it?
Do you recall up the map as we look at each on each side?
And Rob, are you assuming or are you anticipating the additional sand pits that people are talking about?
We're anticipating that as well.
So where do you wanna go?
To the maps, I think.
This one?
No,
No, we had one with the MCI.
yes,
If you give me a
I think
number.
around page 100 or something.
Yeah.
It's only after 20, I'll have you say. We're almost there.
Slowing down a little bit as we find it.
If you can't say it in 40 pages, Rob, maybe,
I think they were pretty, I think just the appendix.
Yeah, this is the appendix.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
that's all that blue
It's
is.
all the appendix. The text itself was 18, I don't know
Yeah.
if these guys
It's
correct.
here.
Yeah.
so here we go. So this is the existing warehouse that's there, that's a and then these are the other 2 buildings that we were looking at to add into for DPW. Both those structures are in really good shape. Obviously they'll both be completely gutted, but the bones of each building, they're in pretty good shape. And then obviously with the wastewater plant being right here, what we don't have is what is gonna be the recommended buffer zone between a wastewater plant and a residential zone? That's gonna be the biggest driver there.
so I guess, I think making the assumption it has to be residential, I mean, I agree.
Or commercial, but you're still
Could be
talking about
industrial.
industrial, but still even then, you're in an industrial zone adjacent to a wastewater plant, there's a buffer. Most wastewater plants are typically away from office spaces and not adjacent to where people are working 24/7. I wouldn't hope someone would wanna open a restaurant adjacent to one.
I think is MCI is 56 acres, where does it start and where do your plans sort of, when you get net development, what are we leaving over for a developer? If we take those 2 buildings,
So we're probably gonna leave around, 25 to 30 acres at that point?
I don't know if we have that in the report,
No.
so when we presented something to the advisory board. And we can kind of look at it, I don't have it in front of me, but I can say, generally speaking.
Oops. There you go.
You're back.
To touch the floor, that's all, not in the wire.
Good.
In essence, this is the access coming in off of Route 2. The wall is not shown around the inside the wall, these two buildings are inside the wall. But we're talking about this area, not this building. Down into here, so something like this. This is very conceptual, and then down in this area is where the sand beds are. And the sand beds are intended not to be, you know, no structure, no building structure above them. But we're trying to keep those, you know, close to the riverfront. And again, the other important consideration is, you can see this is, I think the flood zone here. And the 200-foot buffer is kind of shown. So this building's within the 200-foot buffer. This building we visited and it had been used for storage. It's an incredible structure. You know, we had, the first time we actually got eyes on it was just last week. But what's important with this building is, if the town doesn't repurpose it, it's probably, you know, very little value to anybody else.
I have a clarifying question. So the sand beds, that's
Yeah.
part of the negotiations for the
Correct.
wastewater treatment, not the DPW. So it's a
Correct.
separate issue.
That's correct.
So how many acres do you need for DPW? Out of this, out of the 53? So let's, if we could separate these
So we
issues.
have a clarifying question, Mary? And,
Yeah.
like, the starter is, what do you need for wastewater, period?
Yes.
Because I think going into the NCI master planning process, which is just launching, you know, in the next month or so with consultants, putting in proposals and that. And
Master
that thing being launched. That's hopefully a given, and then the additional part is if. Public Works was to be located at MCI, it would take an additional amount.
Right.
But I hope that we're carving off,
It's the
that
addition,
wastewater stuff doesn't get credited against DPW.
Exactly.
It needs to be credited against the project.
Exactly.
So,
that's where I'm going. So Rob, do you know how many acres you'd need for the DPW? Independent of the wastewater treatment?
We'd have to take a look at.
Yeah, we have it, I just can't pull it up. We've had some numbers that we presented to the advisory board, it hasn't changed.
Okay.
And we can,
We can get that
we
answer.
could possibly include that,
Great.
but that's, these reports. At what point are they final, and as, you know, for instance, would that be something we could add, you know, just ask?
Yeah, but the core is, what, to Keith's point, is what is taken anyway
Correct,
by that?
Right,
How many acres are that?
yeah.
And what is the incremental ask
yes.
from there that you take away from the development of MCI? So from
We
the
have
numbers
that
I
data.
have, somehow it is somewhere incremental 4-ish acres, something.
Yeah, because I can't remember, and I don't wanna give the wrong number, but we have done the calculations to look online, but I would think it'd be a helpful exhibit. To show the report, so people could see it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
That would be
asking,
helpful.
when is final. Is that we can-
I think it would be good also when we go through the pros and cons of, let's say, the top 3 or options you have in here. In the report to say, okay, this is an incremental ask of so many acres.
Yes,
Because it sounds a lot when you say, okay, you take eight acres, but if already 4 or 5 of them are taken anyway,
exactly,
then it looks completely different.
exactly.
Right. While you talk, I'm gonna pull up the information, I'll sort of.
Because you have this nice slide where you.
Yeah, that's, thank you. I just emailed it to me, great.
Okay, should I stop sharing and you share it, or?
Can you share?
Email it to Sven too, and he can put it up on the screen.
Okay, you can fit it, that'd be
Whatever
great.
you can do.
Okay.
Okay, there we are. That is some good camera that you placed.
So Sven, the big picture, are we going to be recommending priority of choices? Is the committee?
It would be good to have a certain order of the options.
Which we have, again, we put together, obviously with the full committee. We'll have their opportunity to view it and review it here. It's on page, sorry,
Oh, no, you sent it to me.
15.
Let me first zoom this here and then I can. Share this again.
Okay. So what what's important here is you have. This is the wastewater treatment infrastructure, kind of brick and mortar, clarifiers, buildings, equipment in black here. You have the, does it say I think the 200-foot buffer. Here, this is the 100-foot wetland. So these are all the environmental buffer zones for the riverfront. You have this circle, the red circle, is a 300-foot buffer around the existing wastewater facilities infrastructure. That's based on TCR 16, which is a regional design basis for wastewater plants. So that's something which is sort of New England based. It's recommendation. It's not a hard and fast standard. We then sort of put around that sort of just, we're not gonna have property that's gonna be circular. I think we've identified area proposed wastewater boundary 15 acres, including 6.4 acres undeveloped. So for the wastewater treatment plant, you're gonna see there is, where's the tail here?
We zoom in.
No, I'm just trying to figure out again, development, there's parcel, so this is the Junction Village area. This is the sand bed that extends, the original sand bed that extends into the Junction Village site. This is the sand bed that was originally, adjacent to, still part of the DCAM property here. So this area would be sort of not built up. The 300-foot buffer already encompasses some of the area and buildings that we're talking about. This is one of the buildings, and this is the other building. And so, what this is a figure we can include in the report, but ultimately the question is going to be how much more and above and beyond wastewater treatment would we be looking at that is for additional benefit for public works. And I think, I'm not sure if we have land and wastewater buffer is 4.6 acres. Land and wastewater buffer shown in vision plan for community. So they were, the color coding that you see here is part of the original vision planning for MCI. And this is just very generally speaking. This was identified as residential. This area would have been identified, but didn't really, call out the wastewater treatment plant, which is a bit of a hiccup. But the purple area is more for industrial, commercial kind of use. So as Rob was saying, whether this area was repurposed, it would highly be unlikely to be residential, looking at this buffer for the wastewater.
So that the turquoise dotted line here, yeah, or that's the border, assuming a 300-foot setback, and that would be the area plus access here.
And this building,
Yeah, but at the moment, what it would be on paper needed for the wastewater.
Probably
treatment.
about 5 acres.
Yeah. So then the marginal one is this corner of this building and this building.
that's right.
So you're more or less a marginal
Increase. And that's the
increase.
net increase
This
for
corner.
public
How
works.
much?
Oh,
And
But
when we
it
can get,
looks like part of the building that Alan wants is
Yeah.
within a buffer area.
this
So-
this building is
Yeah,
in,
One is-
So-
but he also wants the
Part of
other
it-
building.
part of it is,
Yeah.
and the question I think you're asking is above what would be. Well, let's be clear, wastewater treatment alone would be generally this area and the sand beds.
Right,
And some of that is already protected, riverfront, that sort of thing, so it's really this area that doesn't have other use. So even these parts of the sand bed we'd repurpose are within the riverfront. This area is where we'd have to sort of redevelop. And so that would obviously infringe on residential development in this area.
redevelop as part of DPW or?
No, this is for treatment, wastewater
Okay, yeah.
treatment.
I think we wanna focus on what we need for DPW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So
That's right.
we're trying to figure out what,
In addition to the treatment, so I'm saying, so.
In
the
addition,
wastewater-
yes.
Yes, in addition,
yes,
and that's what we're talking about, these buildings here. And DCAM is even interested, can you do anything more with this site, you know, outside the wall? So we're gonna be exploring all, but the real focus is can we repurpose these existing
right, for this report.
for this,
Okay.
that's part of the report.
Yeah, we should know that, I think.
The question on the status of the report, so what's in here is a draft, right?
Correct,
You will have a final recommendation.
correct.
The cost analysis of the use of the MCI, I know that's not in here.
That is, we have, you know, a ballpark estimate again, you know, we've taken the square footage and looked at different buildings that have been built by different other towns. And just kind of taken, I don't wanna say swag, but I guess, you know, of what the construction costs would
But
be.
this would be repurposing of existing buildings,
Correct.
some renovation.
There still would be a significant amount of renovation, because all these buildings, once you take them apart, you have to bring them up to current code.
Right.
So if there's any elevators, you have to have a generator, you know, go down the line of every,
Yeah, he's
you
right.
know, how to say it, every accessible. ADA compliant issues, safety issues, fire, alarm, you name it down, all the way down the line.
So one of the uncertainties in the whole site is remediation costs, and of course, that will vary in the site, but in terms of. If we took that site for public works, have you had any thinking in terms of remediation costs?
I mean, the one thing would be if within the building, we can see what's there very easily,
But outside the building?
outside the building, we
anything-
have to pothole and get tests done, that's the only way we know it's for certain what's underneath there, but the thing is. And Alan can jump in here, with this plan, with these three structures here. We would be just gutting them, we wouldn't be excavating down
Yes.
and disturbing,
Yeah,
you know.
that's
No,
important.
I understand, does that mean you're estimating sort of zero in-ground remediation?
I
or
would say
zero?
it'd be.
No, zero investigation,
I would
this is a big question of the whole site.
Yes.
Correct, I would say there wouldn't be zero, we would probably have to pay to have it investigated, it would probably be, you know, due diligence to make sure that. When we go there, we're not, we don't have another 22-29 main. To, you know, it's not gonna be the same, but you know, something of that scale, you know, to remediate. Within the building, I would say the areas of concern are probably any of the mechanical spaces, because the piping would probably be coated with asbestos. Especially because most of the mechanical equipment's probably over 50 years old, so. That's probably the two areas of concern that I see, lead paint would probably be the other one.
But for outside the buildings, in your analysis, you would consider investigation costs and,
We'll add that in, I don't think we have
Yeah.
enough money, I mean.
yeah, I mean,
Well-
you probably should, but beyond that, it's pretty much unknown.
In our subcommittee, what we did is we had some swags, as you said, Ron, but we also recommended that we have studies done to get a better feel for the cost.
Yeah,
So
but it's
maybe-
tough to
maybe
do a
that's-
study at the site without actually doing an investigation, because, you know, whether there's contamination outside the buildings to be determined, so you're gonna have to carry some cost for that, which is less than a 2229 soil cost and probably more than a building cost.
So are you saying, you just suggesting, Paul, that we just go with our best guess, because we're not gonna have the,
Well, I don't think you're gonna have any
Opportunity to
remediation, you're not gonna do an investigation for purposes of this report.
oh, for this report, right?
Now, if the town decides to move on this and it's part of the MCI strategy and the state agrees. Before we definitely have to do a.
Yeah, I would think it would be-
Study, when we do that study, compared to when we do the other studies,
That's right.
I'm not sure, it doesn't sound.
Well, I'm assuming we're collecting a list of
It's-
further studies,
it's definitely
right?
out
Ours
there
will be in that
to be done,
file, I think this might be in that
Yeah,
file.
What-
definitely
what-
should be in there.
What I'm hearing from this discussion then is that from just the get-go with NCI Concord, DCAM has been saying, well, it's gonna be the developer that has to bear the costs that are associated with remediating the
That's right.
study. So what the town is doing is by raising its hand and saying, we want that property, part of that expense is gonna fall on the town.
Exactly,
which it wouldn't if we weren't here, which if we weren't looking at DPW here.
Right,
So Alan,
That's worst case assumption, and probably best case assumption, but.
So, but
That's-
one question, on. So if we would not be interested in these buildings here. And we would only take the wastewater treatment facility. Assuming a 300-foot setback, which is that red circle. Would the town not anyway own this land of which is the setback and in the orange, or would that be with the developer and he can't just develop it?
Everything has to be negotiated with the state, but my first reaction would be, we would not own any of the land.
And we would just cut it
It
here,
would be the wastewater treatment plant and any building that would support the wastewater treatment.
but the zoning or whatever
it
would
would be
have.
restricted
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the developer.
300 feet of permissive.
That's what I'm saying,
So I wouldn't assume that.
Right? So you could have different land uses, in the master plan, they could contemplate, what could you do there? Could you have parking? You know, certainly, you know, it's not, drug manufacturing, an office space, but is it cold storage? You know, who knows? I mean, these are things that would have to be.
It would be a
contemplated.
developer that decides.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just want to be sure we.
Exactly.
Yeah, based on what the risks are.
Yes.
I just have one, so Alan, just because the EVC is sort of prioritizing, store capacity and development going forward, how that relates. So big picture, where it sits today, we're at 600,000 gallons. Is that roughly, what's the wastewater capacity?
310,000 gallons a day.
And what, are these sand pits to be built, or are they included in that 300?
No, so the existing permit is for surface water discharge to the Assabet River for 310,000 gallons. Those sand beds were abandoned. They were part of the process decades ago. And when they did some upgrades, they no longer needed them, much like we did over at our wastewater treatment plant. At the point, DOC just abandoned them. And so we are looking at repurposing or bringing groundwater discharge to those areas with the expectation that the investment would allow us to get some capacity. That's really, and the challenge is I don't want to get too far over the ski. We have an approach and a strategy we're trying to work, but it's not a bird in the hand yet.
But are we talking about an extra 100,000, extra
We're talking
200,000?
millions. There's a question of whether it's tens of millions.
No, dollars.
No,
Gallons,
capacity.
gallons.
I'm only talking capacity.
Up from, it was about 150,000 to 300,000
No,
gallons per day.
no, we're talking about the total capacity if we have the wastewater plant with the surface water discharge going.
Right.
Along with discharge capability in the sand beds.
That would be 450 to 600,000 gallons.
But this isn't the land
Yeah.
use discussion.
So,
Discussion.
okay, let's bring it back to,
I asked the question on cost, so you don't have that in the report yet, the
Right.
chart right now says unknown for that cost column, you plan to fill that in. And I don't know what the other costs are, I'm just wondering. Relative, so your sense it's gonna be but the cost will be high for that.
Or just the investigation or for just the.
No, the cost, well, this chart's probably. Total turnkey cost of the move, to MCI.
What chart are you looking at, Paul?
The chart on page,
Yeah, the
30. The
30.
summary matrix of,
Sorry.
that's the only, that's, various criteria, but I'm looking at that first column, which has cost. So it's all relative one to another, I guess, but.
Yeah. Mhm. So there you go.
And I don't know what the
Says
relative, I
unknown.
mean, they're high cost of the other ones because you're building a new structure. I mean, here you're not building a new structure, you're renovating and maybe remediating, so I'm just trying to get a sense, you probably fill that in the final report, but.
So, I apologize, I didn't look at this, how many square feet are we talking about? Just like the second building, how big is the building? Just square footage.
We're talking about the buildings that are closer to the center of campus.
Yeah,
I don't have that.
No,
I know the building that's closest to the plant was about 14,000 square feet. But the other two, I don't have those.
so those are a lot bigger.
Yeah, they are, but I don't wanna give you a number and it's.
We're, just so this group knows, there is a, what do you call it, planning use or, what the space use assessment that we're presently, working with a firm to generate, and we're almost at a point we're gonna have that information, so that would be, again, if this is draft, something we could possibly incorporate into the report too.
Space use for DPW.
For public works in this campus.
It is compared to like fire and police, I mean, DPW, not be, some of it's just a big garage, right? So we're not-
A lot of it's just storage.
So when we talk about price per square foot to build, it's gonna be significantly less. than-
Correct, it's not office and technology and everything else, yes, a lot of it is garage space.
But you do include offices for like engineering.
Well, and there will be
Okay,
as well,
so there is some office space.
exactly,
Okay, good.
that'll be part of the space. Assessment.
The MCI construct is a different type of construction, it's not new construction, this is renovation and rehab of existing
That's right.
structures.
Okay, so for this location, we have a few additional information that need to be added to the report. But
So I have what the additional space required for DPW is on top of what the wastewater plant is.
yeah,
Investigation costs for any remediation, an estimate of that.
An estimate to rehab the buildings as well, right? Or bring them up to code as you said.
you have in your ballpark renovation costs.
Yes.
For the main buildings of $350 to $450 per square foot.
What you said.
Yeah, one thing I would highlight to this group, I thought was fascinating, is there's one slide that we were able to call from Acton. When they did their recent facility, talking about the cost for public works facilities over the past 10, 15 years. And it's pretty telling as far as the trend in size and scale. So, we're not in a vacuum. It's a pretty good, yeah, that is pretty telling.
Okay, so that's one of the locations. So the next one,
Next option is I mentioned it when we started, was Ripley.
yeah,
So. Obviously if the school gets demoed, that whole parcel becomes available, there is sufficient space for. To relocate DPW to that location. The challenge there obviously is. Traffic to the local, neighborhood. And then, just, that would probably be the big driver in there. The costs for building Ripley into, or transforming that area into a new. DPW campus would probably be very similar to MCI. I know we have a couple structures that are already there at MCI, but with, the amount of demolition that we have to do, would probably be pretty close.
So again, just real big picture, how many square feet in total cost?
so that's 42,000 square foot building in your report.
We really need to take into account, lost opportunity.
Yes,
as well,
I do.
because the cost of not using that Ripley for housing, this is where the meshing with the other groups, we have an estimate for the value of Ripley in different, so if we use it for DPW, there's a lost opportunity cost there, which somehow needs to be combined or at least articulated.
But what,
Yeah, when we did our analysis, we assumed that if we if we vacated Ripley, there would be land reserved for playing fields. Okay, and then that would leave 12 acres for another use. And I think you're showing 18, so we'd have to make sure that we're consistent there. And then when we estimated how much cash we could pull out of that or unlock from that property, it was about 18 million to sell it, and then another 4 million in tax revenues from potential housing. So it's a big opportunity
For market rate house.
It's a big swing, yeah.
for,
Yeah, market rate.
it's, B, residential B, so it's pretty dense, but, yeah, so it'd be 18 million plus 4 of the amount of revenue or cash that you could, well, cash would be the 18 and 4 million would be over 10 years. So there's as Paul
Yeah.
points out, there's a real opportunity.
Yeah, it's part of the
out there.
analysis, it's not the construction, obviously.
Yeah,
So, I mean, but also, the other thing we'll add into there is that if we do relocate, DPW from Cowes, we will have Cowes be.
that's right,
Right, that's,
Right.
that's
that's
right.
your net, yeah, we're doing that on municipal, so.
We're finding Ripley is, unlocks more value than the other sites we're looking at, so. If we wanna be consistent, you can use our numbers, but it's up to you.
That's the thing.
Is it drier
What?
than the other side?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
If,
that's.
Paul, given your experience on the recreation department, is there any, so for example, Ripley has by far our best lily field.
Yeah, there,
Is there any thought to making more sort of recreation, sort of playing fields at Ripley? If we take Ripley down,
Or
Well, I
keeping
can't see-
6, we're keeping 6 acres already.
yeah, you mean,
no, it's on one baseball.
I mean expanding.
We have one baseball field and what, 3 soccer fields, 2 soccer fields?
I'm not in the recreation commission anymore, there wasn't any discussion of expanding that, but. I think the headwinds would be cost in the town versus the opportunity of the town to sell it. I mean, it's a big financial swing there. And I don't know, there hasn't been any, to your point, I don't recall any discussion of expanding what's there. Keeping what's there for sure, so if the planned DPW facility would encroach on really the fields in any way, that would be, I guess, local opposition.
It'll be mild.
Well,
Yes, that'd be a mild way to put it.
mild.
So just getting back to, so if we have, so 42,000 square feet at $500 a foot is 21. So we're talking like 25 to 35. Is that sort of where we are?
Thinking that range.
Yeah, that's listed, but if I look elsewhere and look at that graph. I've seen 60,000 for public works now,
60 million.
60 million, excuse me, yeah, the numbers are.
That's like 60,000, sign it up.
That was to my office, I'm sorry. 60 million.
1950.
But can we try just again to look at the pros and cons of each
Yeah.
location? So here, one of the cons we have to add to the report is that then this land would not be available for potential a revenue opportunity by sale and ongoing
right.
tax revenue.
Right.
Yeah. The positives you have someone in here is, well, we most likely will not have similar environmental risks as we have with an MCI.
Mhm.
Most likely less complex to negotiate against the town itself.
Less public one. What'd you say?
Less complex to negotiate,
Yeah.
yeah. The location, the report, and now you can it looks like that location is a plus,
The location of which? Ripley?
yeah,
Mm.
or not.
Well,
Well, in one sense, it's kind of good central location, but in another sense, it's in a very residential area.
I'm really interested in the neighborhood criteria here, Mark got us into that, because. Whether it's here or 2229, the neighborhood criteria is rather complicated. I think there'd be neighborhood opposition. Whether it's suitability or not objectively, but subjectively it'd be opposition.
Though, I mean, we definitely know, throwing it out there, 3 of the locations we would definitely have that as the issue would be here. Ripley,
Mhm.
2229, and also 509 Bedford would also fall into that category.
So when you say high in that matrix, is that high, is that positive or negative?
Negative. No.
Okay, so high implies negative. Got it.
High opposition.
Got
If
it.
I can just interject for a minute, I do think you're gonna have neighborhood opposition from the Merriam Street and Dalton Street. Like it's really not just one street. It's you've got a bunch of neighborhoods over there. And then the other thing, just in terms of hazardous material, there's definitely asbestos in that building. Obviously, you know, if you implode the building, they'll take care of that, but I just don't know if you should note that in there or not.
Okay, so some hazardous material,
Yeah.
some potential.
Yeah.
I think just throwing it out there, it's more of a concern with soil than, you know, Alan can or anyone else can jump in, but. You know, asbestos abatement versus soil, I mean, we're talking, you know,
That's right, that's right.
Oh, really?
The hazardous materials are in the building,
yeah,
not in the soil, property.
Okay, so, good, okay.
but we'll note that, thank you.
Okay, so the third one on the list is the Bedford Street. Or that is the ag fields next to the wastewater treatment facility, is that correct?
That is correct.
So. Is there a map, so if you look at the wastewater, is that just to the right or to the left, where is it?
Can you bring that map up?
Is it on here?
It's on the plan, there's a. Here, page 40.
Hmm?
Yeah, 50. I'll try and find those. We can get that.
What's the street address?
509.
PDF page 86,
86.
I think so.
'82, '84, '86.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the, just when you come off of Old Bedford, you come up an access road. The treatment plant is back here. This is the ag field when people go, Peter Spring Road is right over here. So this is the ag area. This is all open space. This is NRC property, but this is all part of the original wastewater campus. This area here where the sand beds are. So we are gonna continue to potentially reserve those for, groundwater discharge as well. That's another potential. But this area here is the area that's most likely for redevelopment. This is the existing wastewater treatment plant. Behind it, we have clarifiers and other equipment and structures too, so. This is a big sort of swale, in the middle. Significant acreage,
The two lots together, I think 21 acres.
that's this one and this one,
Yeah.
yeah. Be about right.
What's the downside of that?
Couple things, there's not so much downside as, sensitive to, there are some rare and endangered species, blending turtle habitat is an issue that we'd be sort of dealing with. I think there's historic agriculture interests that are, another, stakeholder. I think those, and then even some, immediate, what's the buffer to a cemetery? That's another consideration when you're talking about neighborhood, where, you have a cemetery and active public works.
Bird watching.
Bird watching is very popular. It's interesting. I like it for the habitat for the.
I like that.
Something there's.
For what, DPW?
Yeah.
So I
Like
think,
landed turtles?
so to the point,
Rather displace turtles than displace.
to the point earlier, again, if this is on the table, it has also opportunity cost means is if you would use it for housing, what could you do? 21 acres, it's already zoned residential E. So you don't need to do any rezoning like any other lots. So there's
Wow, that's a lot of money.
that's a lot, this is
That's a lot.
30+ million and running tax revenue.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money just to think about the opportunity cost, but we already just, as you probably saw, remember we received a letter from the community on this lot,
On the agriculture.
on the agriculture
Is
side.
it under a permanent conservation restriction, do you know?
The permanent,
Say that again?
Is it under a permanent conservation?
no, it's the
No, no,
lot down here.
That's down.
So you should not step on any cable. This lot
There
down
must be a
here,
wire under
this
the.
down here, near the, this is under.
Yes.
This one down, Mary,
What?
this one down there,
Yeah,
that's under conservation.
that is.
These two,
Not these, yeah.
not.
Okay, and those are the ones that
But
are.
at the same time, we're talking about, 21 acres for the purposes of this. Wouldn't be the full 21 acres, it'd be significantly less, so we will take a look at that. In terms of what the lost opportunity cost would be.
Yeah.
Is Keith, is this on the housing
Good point.
radar?
No.
No.
Nope. It is now.
You get a lot of pushback from the agricultural community for those
Just
because
so this, yeah, there's a lot of
we
interest
have.
in that.
I hate to say it, but every location that we pick, we're gonna get pushed back.
Correct.
I hate to be the obvious thing, but for every single
You are.
location, we've received at least one email, if not two.
Except MCI.
Except MCI.
Except-
Well,
And but MCI, so,
This is a,
but
this is a good,
in all seriousness, we are, we're putting these locations together, we know we're not gonna be able to appease everybody with this. So. How it goes, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're
It's
right
stating
about
the
that.
obvious, but it is.
You're right about
does that mean your recommendation becomes pretty obvious?
So,
I
so
don't
I don't know.
want
if
to
we-
preempt your group, but.
No, but
I don't know, so I'd like to discuss what I think the negatives of putting DPW and MCI are. If we're gonna sort of do the pros and cons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Go.
So for me, it's, sort of once in a generation opportunity for commercial development. It's right on Route 2 gets fixed, there's nothing like it in the town for that type of, for commercial use. So, hopefully, Rob, it's not 25 acres, so we're not going from 54 to high 20s or 30s, so for me, I look at that as, MCI is not only my first choice, it's probably my third choice of these three is to, because it's the consumption of land that we just don't have anywhere else. That I think it's super attractive for commercial use,
When you say commercial, what do you mean by that?
industrial,
Industrial,
retail.
commercial, industrial.
No, just everything other than sort of residential. So industrial, commercial.
So the governor's top priority is housing for
Right.
that side.
And they
But
do,
our-
they do own the site.
So we're trying to make these decisions kind of, I don't wanna say in a vacuum, but I think we need to get. A good, what does that buffer zone need to be? I think we're, without that, having that like factual piece of information there with, we're gonna make kind of a decision shooting in the dark. We have 300 feet, but I've looked at it and I've built these wastewater plants. They usually thousands, if not a quarter mile from residential zones, depending on how big they are, right? Smaller ones, it's still different, but you have these larger ones where they process millions of gallons a day. The odor is obscene, right? So I'm just saying that, I don't disagree with what you're looking at because I do agree with you, but I think at the same time. With not having that piece of data saying, hey, buffer zone truly. Is it 100 feet or is it 500 feet, right? What is, what other mitigation things that we have to put in place into the wastewater plants, beyond. Just getting it operating to process water, but also odor control. And, does that plant even have methane digester, right?
No, I mean, these are open.
So I don't think you and I are adverse on this at all. I'm not pushing housing for this at all.
No.
I'm actually the opposite. I'd rather see, Amazon warehouse. I'd like to see some lab space. I'd love to see some retail. And the reason for that is when the town starts doing an analysis of as far as like, financial opportunity. These businesses use no school, they use no DPW, they use no trash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're just paying taxes. So I think if we're really trying to, add, talk about financial sustainability going forward. And I know it won't be a massive incremental, subsidy to the taxpayers. But I think not to seriously consider maximizing commercial use at MCI, it's probably my highest.
But isn't that again, down to numbers, so similar to what we said on the others, the potential. Revenue income by sale and ongoing, let's say 10-year tax revenue. Here would be what's the estimated 10-year tax revenue for commercial properties sitting on this additional whatever 4 acres. And you can just calculate that through.
We can, what do you mean we can't?
And we can.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's very basically compare the opportunity cost between the locations, you say.
Well, and we can't put commercial on Bedford Street. We can't put it at 229 Main, we can't put it at certain places.
Yeah.
You can put it to-
We can put it at
It's public works.
We can put it at 2229 Main.
Mary, every developer I've spoken to, every broker I've spoken to doesn't agree with your statement.
Well,
With the traffic and everything else, at
Okay, but
229 Main, they just don't agree with it. And this has been a 5-year
I
debate.
would counter by saying the state would not agree with all commercial development at MCI either. And
Well,
they-
no, I don't
other
think we need to
property
say
owners.
all. I didn't say all,
Well, how much then?
Just on the first floor.
Well, I mean.
Okay, just on the first floor, we can do that,
First
we
floor.
can do that.
So one thing you touched upon was, lab space, and I mean, there's a lot of lab space, I was building them 2-3 years ago. And there's enough lab space to satisfy probably 10 years of lab growth in the Boston area. The other thing, the failures of a lot of these developers, as well as Boynton Yards is a good example in Somerville, they had a plan for 7 buildings in that yard. And they went ahead with the lab spaces because they were chasing the money and they did not build the campus. Part of their master plan was to build housing. They did not do that. And 2 of their buildings are sitting empty right now over there. One is Boynton Gateway, one is Boynton, and we do not want to have that happen here as well,
I totally appreciate that, but think about like warehousing here, you're right on Route 2, it'd be perfect. Right?
But I think with that, it would be just talking at, both, I live in that area, by the way. So without the redevelopment of Route 2, that would be catastrophic at the area. You're talking, there's already traffic, that's terrible at this point. Now you're gonna add all these extra vehicles at all hours. Just at peak times in the morning and the evening, you're talking almost 24 hours of vehicle traffic, and not just on Route 2, but also they're gonna start peeling off to the side streets.
So, but what is the warehousing tax revenue we're getting? Because these are warehouses on big boxes, they're probably lower in value. Or,
I just had a suggestion that I don't disagree with
Yeah.
what I'm hearing here, that there's and it's just that the solution though is not gonna come from the work we're doing, the solution is gonna come from the MCI Concord
right,
master plan,
That's
and that will dictate what the maximum amount of uses are, and I just threw it out, but I'd love to have the entire first floor of anything that's built on MCI be commercial.
Right.
And then you put up, you have residential above it, or have some combination of that.
Yep.
Maximize commercial, that would be fantastic, that would be great. And so the question for this option is, what's the incremental amount that you need for public works to out of that site? And just for us to know that,
Yes.
that's fine. It's gonna be another process that's gonna determine what the uses are at MCI, but certainly by the time the master planning is done for MCI, which will be any minute, to know that they should look at carving out one of the scenarios of carving out a portion for public works, so that this option can be better informed. On to the next option.
Exactly,
So-
I agree. And I think,
I'd love to see.
but I would
Commercial,
add
first floor.
to the list of things that should be in this is.
Can't work.
What is the lost tax revenue, so that we can
I'm
compare.
sorry, say that again.
So one of the things that should come out of that master study, when you look at that, is what is the lost tax revenue if we eat into.
So-
Into this here.
You know, I said it earlier, but what about, what's the process of, and who would do the study of, you know, what the buffer zone should be? You know, I think because that'll drive how much, you know, space we'll have for commercial versus this versus that application. I think, you know, again, I'm not saying we're pushing recommendations kind of in the blind, but I think without that, having that study done, we're kind of, you know, taking a stab at it, you know, because the last thing we wanna make, again, you know, I would hope it's smaller, but what if it's bigger? What if the recommendation is that the zone is bigger and then we lose more, you know?
How do we find that out?
Well, I mean,
So I believe the NCI master planning study should address this and address it forthwith, because we as a committee are running out of runway in terms of our ability to make meaningful recommendations, because we simply don't have, as Rob accurately points out, we don't have the data to understand the nature of that buffer zone. And by the way, it's in the interest of the state to completely understand how that buffer varies depending on adjacent land use, because it's different. And there may well be a gap between a buffer for a residential use, throwing a number out there, because I don't know the Massachusetts
Mhm.
numbers, but if it's 500 feet for residential use, but it's 250 for industrial, well, then you've got some play space,
Mhm.
right? And so this is a land use planning 101 question that a consultant for MCI should be able to answer well, and answer quickly.
Yeah, and just following Keith's point, I don't think we'll actually get real economics until the RFP goes out to start trying to figure out who will come to that. What those, you know, potential tenants will look like.
Ground floor retail is more tricky. I mean, as Keith knows, it works when you're at a high traffic intersection, and it tends to work for the ground floor retail that has signage or window exposure at that intersection. But once you get 50 feet back, then you start to lose traffic, and a lot of that space has been transformed into community meeting spaces and so forth, because it's not rentable. And it also might not necessarily be the kind of commercial that's attracted to that location, but I'm fully in support of, you know, introducing commercial somewhere, in some way that makes sense.
What about the topic, Mark, you brought up in part of this private public partnerships? Would this be something you could play to the developer, say, it's a private public partnership, the developer builds this stuff out for public works?
For the public works piece, yes. For the larger piece, no.
Yeah, I mean, for the public works. piece.
Yeah.
so usually with the PPP, they're looking for something where they're driving revenue down the line, like a tunnel, like, you know, getting tolls and things like that. That's usually my experience with PPP projects.
Yeah, more recently, you've seen in fire, police, you've seen the traditional municipal buildings where the private entity zones, you know, develops, then leases, the municipality comes in. And the trick, I guess, from the landowner perspective, is just offering the type of maintenance that that satisfies the municipality. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. They're super long, you know, long leases, and they're much more common than they were 10, 15 years ago.
And where this has been done?
Specifically, I don't know, in Maryland, I have a friend who works for a company in Maryland. I was actually talking to the chief in Lexington, the chief of fire, who you were talking about it as well. So I think it's more local. I could find out.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw a cautionary red flag in the wind about P3s, of which I'm a little bit of an expert. Right?
Yeah,
And while I know that there certainly are agreements to provide municipal facilities and municipal services through P3s, and we can look at them and get more data, I don't think it's a panacea. I think that there are, this is part of a sort of a privatization push that can have some political wins behind it that doesn't necessarily end up 30 years down the road, when that P3 has given the ability to set rents and leases to an outside firm. A lot of municipalities have found that they're facing higher prices than if they had simply, you know, held onto the facility themselves and built it themselves. So I'm not saying that it's not an option, but I think we want to be very careful and do our homework before we
Yeah, I would agree that I think it's like short-term economics and it's driving the cost down.
Yeah.
So if those are your two most important items and longevity, long-term stability, if you will, and ownership by the town, I would never suggest PPP.
So we just have to do more homework, but it's certainly an interesting option. I just don't want people glomming onto it and thinking that it's a super solution.
You could get a couple of those examples, I'm curious as to
Okay.
what those projects are.
You want some, just for DPW or just municipal uses in general?
Just in general, give us a spread because it doesn't hurt. I mean, again, my experience in P3s has been a ton of projects. Highway, which is a whole different animal because they, you know, they're responsible for maintaining the roads, but they're also collecting the tolls and, you know, it's a little different than this model, which again. You know, I have no experience on sure, so.
So we touched on three, which you classified as good use,
Yes.
then we have possible use. And
Wait,
not
wait,
suitable,
Sven,
yeah.
can I interrupt for a minute?
Yeah.
I think there's a question that we wanted a definitive answer to, which is what's the buffer zone requirement?
Yes.
And do we have, is that in the master plan, finding out that information? Do we know if it's in the IFP?
I mean, for NCI.
Yeah,
I'm not
Frank's-
sure, I don't think it's been called out specifically, but it should certainly be part of it. I mean, it would be hard to, the problem with the vision plan is it didn't include any of this. With the master
that's right.
plan, we'll
Well,
certainly make sure it's a part of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's like, to me, the vision plan's kind of cautionary tale.
Exactly.
You don't explicitly ask for it.
That's right.
You
Now,
don't get
let
it.
let me state this, there's a decision that's gotta be made, again, the 300-foot buffer is TR 16, which is guidance for New England, for wastewater, guidance, so it's not a standard. And it goes to Mark's point, which is, well, it's guidance for residential, you know, it said the kind of use, a parking garage might be an appropriate use. Right, I mean,
Or warehouse.
or a warehouse potentially.
And it's guidance based on odor mainly.
Well, it's basically, you know,
Gas.
aesthetics and, you know,
Well, yeah, odor.
odor primarily.
I would think this would be one of the most important issues to tackle,
Yeah.
What?
because you're gonna affect.
The buffer you're talking about?
Well,
So we need an action item, because
yeah,
it seems like it's
that,
pivotal.
you know, we'll make sure. Listening, we're gonna be, you know, involved with the master plan process, we know this is a priority,
Good.
it's important to
Okay,
factor in.
Okay, but just for the report, the next word, make sure that it is rather high on the list of whatever next steps.
Capture this.
Yeah.
That's
Back in the buffer, I think we have that information. I think the MCI has it not in the vision plan, but since then, the development, the discussions with the DCAM, the MCI advisory group has tackled that. We do have that information.
I think they have that chart.
Yeah,
This is that chart, that's where it came from, so.
I think we need something more than that, is what I'm
Well,
hearing.
so Rob's point is, it can be,
Rob.
it's dependent, he knows what most wastewater treatment plants have. If you have the area, you would design accordingly. I think there is going to be a decision that has to be made as far as the value of that land, and that's.
And what will developers do adjacent to a wastewater plant, you know, besides, you know, housing's one thing, but, you know, an office space, it's use, whatever it is. That it all changes the dynamics of that, you know.
I don't know if it's a lot of work, but it seems to, I'm sort of where Keith is, and that is option one. You know, is the wastewater treatment facility expanded with the pits.
Mhm.
Then including sort of the two buildings, and maybe the third option is, you know, you stay within the circle. You knock down part of the building and either create a new building or amend it
So
to
let
maximize.
So here's the good
You know.
news. It's very soon, we're gonna have this planning or space planning assessment to look at the area and potential, and there may be some things that we're not even talking about, because again, we're not expert, that we'll be able to present to the next generation group of whoever's gonna manage this. It'll be very informative, and it'll help this, we know where you wanna go, that's important, but we don't have that information yet. But it is actually in the works.
Okay.
Okay.
Should we talk about the the possible use ones very quickly, short.
Option 4 was renovating Kaiser Road. Again, I'll keep it quick and then, you know, if there's any other question, we can dive into it, but. The cost there obviously would be, you know, there would be a lot of cost with temporary relocation of staff and operation, because. If we do a wholesale renovation of the building, we're gonna have to temporarily set up in different parts of town, so there'll be. Costs that can't, you know, we don't have an estimate on, but they do exist, you know, setting up temporary facilities. Until the new campus is, you know, been, you know. Built or rebuilt, excuse me, so.
So before you go on, how much of Kaiser Road today is usable? Is the sort of the concern about the flooding a real concern or not really? My question is sort of like similar to the fire and police station, is that. Is it a reasonably good site? In worse conditions, that is the 100-year flood, whatever it is. Or is it just, are we trying to cram something there that, you know, we're gonna spend sort of good money after bad, if you will, it's just not big enough?
It's more of that, but then the environmental flooding is a legitimate issue for whatever redevelopment. To accommodate that, it has to. We know most of that's in the flood zone.
Russ, raised their hand, Russ.
Yeah, the fire police station has never flooded due to the river or waterway. The recent water damage they had was an internal plumbing issue.
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the existing campus doesn't satisfy the space needs,
That's right.
which is why,
But
why is that an alternative?
It's an alternative because if you look at the TBA work that was done and there wasn't other, MCI wasn't available, they looked at developing, but it would tear down the structures and then rebuild sort of a more massive structure on that campus. So that's kind of what the baseline was. So it's been evaluated, and in that TBA report, you can kind of see the details. It's less than ideal, but they were given, what would you do on this campus if you had to?
Right, so it's possibly is, but given the space needs.
Yeah, it's less
why
than
were you talking
that's
about
why
that?
it's not
Why
on
is
the list.
that,
But
why is that on the list?
it's number 4 on the list.
But I guess
It's still possible.
I'm with Paul, why is it in the
Yeah,
non-sewer?
Yeah, it should be not.
Well, part of it is we own the land and it's already exists and the neighborhood issue, I mean, it's. We don't have to reintroduce ourselves to the neighborhood, the other complexities are, what Rob said, we'd have to be staging the redevelopment.
No, I know.
It's not ideal.
But correct me, the reason we're even talking about this is because you don't have enough space,
Well,
and there's a space need.
It's all relative, right? For instance, we're looking at the landfill as well.
Yeah.
So it's.
and I mean, let's be frank, options. Options are slim.
I just walked around Walden.
We don't have, you know, 50 locations to choose from, which of those two, that's why it's on the list still. You know, we have to look at, you know, there's 3 locations that have a sufficient amount of acreage, but everywhere else, we're running thin on in terms of enough
So
land.
basically, you're evaluating a don't move option.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Call it that.
But
It's not gonna be in the top 3, so whether it's in column 2 or 3, right?
Yeah, we're picking nits here.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's not gonna be in the top.
2229 name.
You know, again, you know, lost revenue is one of the items there, also the location where it is not ideal. It's far away from both town centers, you know, it's not, and then. The impact on the neighborhood would be the 3rd item there.
So on your first point, lost revenue, do you sized it, or is that just a hunch?
It'd be the same as the other locations. I'm just throwing it out there now.
But I've heard sort of anecdotally that there's, I think, less of a desire for people to maybe move to 229 Main as a residential experience as opposed to some of the other sites, so it wouldn't be the same.
It's all pretty.
Well, there's,
So this
We
is where.
really haven't engaged that conversation.
yeah, that's,
Probably won't.
I don't
get
think
into
you
it here.
I don't think you can make assumptions based on a few anecdotes. I think there is land on 2229 Main that has never been contaminated that could be suitable for housing. And that's a much broader conversation. So for us to just eliminate the possibility is very premature.
But I think it's in the right place. It's in the possible use list. We can debate other points here.
Okay. 1231 Old Marlboro, Peabody.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same
Where,
thing.
where it is, cost to redevelop. Neighborhood impact, we've already seen, you know. An email from the soon to be abutter, you know, so it's, again. You know, not to say the email plays into anything, because every location that we would choose. Whether it be now, down the road, when it becomes more, you know, solid, we're gonna have resistance for somebody or, you know, somebody's. So,
Because in any residential, any quiet residential street that you put a DPW facility on, you're gonna have neighborhood opposition. And well deserved.
Plus, there's an opportunity cost at Peabody
Right.
for housing and revenue streams for taxes.
and then the last two locations that, you know, and again, we were spitballing locations, you know, when we first started developing this list. 755 Walden, space is inadequate. And we probably would get a lot of resistance to that area there as well. And then Virginia Road was just thrown out there to commercial space, but it would require a lot of, you know, selective demolition, and we don't even know if the buildings would even be suitable or if they're even available, you know, so. It was just an idea because there's a big plot of land out there and we could take a look at it, but it's too far away from town centers, access is terrible, so it's just.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Just what Howard wants to do.
Yeah,
Sign me up.
okay.
Okay, so how do we take it from here? So
So I have the notes in regards to adding some information for MCI regarding what we need to get for, you know, the amount of land that we're gonna need for this ask. Also adding, you know, line for cost for investigation for any remedial action that may need to be done. We're gonna get a sharper estimate on rehabbing the buildings. A mention of potential lost tax revenue. And then, you know, I don't know where the action is gonna be, but getting that buffer zone defined. Would be, you know, the last item there.
but a lot of that depends on the master plan.
Yes,
Yeah, so that is work stream outside of our work group.
Yep.
Um,
yeah, you. I want to flag that as maybe a risk to some of the recommendations or a dependency. Risk isn't the right word, dependency to a lot of the assumptions you're making about the
So
site.
Judith and Sven, are we gonna have, like a format of pros and cons that are gonna be sort of, that each group is gonna use? Or how's it gonna work?
So at this stage, each group is doing their own thing, because even a standardized set of criteria doesn't work for every typology. But I think once the reports are in, and I can't remember who was asking about procedure earlier in timing. Oh, it might have been Alan, maybe it was Alan. So everybody's doing their draft report, bringing it to the large group. We're having a conversation. The draft reports, I think, will get adjusted based on the conversations that we're having now. They'll get submitted, I think, by the end of February. And then Sven and I will take the 3 draft reports and then make a larger report out of them. And to the extent we can standardize there, we definitely will. So that the end report will end up looking uniform, but I think at this stage, they might look a little bit different. Does that help?
Yeah.
Does that seem
Yeah.
sensible?
Yeah.
That's kind of.
It's, I think the goal is. The next meeting on February 20th is to have all the sub reports together. And then we fire up AI and.
And let it do some work.
Yeah, okay, so, but for the group is. Any other questions from the group on this subgroup?
So, I guess and maybe I'm cheating here, but so you know, Rob, what's your recommendation? I mean, of the three good uses, what's 1, 2, and 3?
I mean, I probably would say, to my mind, one would be MCI. Two would probably be Bedford, and then, Ripley would probably be 3. In that order. That'd be my recommendation, just because. Where MCI is, I mean, it's a lot, there are gonna be a lot of competing uses. I mean, you know, I even. Going spitballing, why don't we, when, you know, with somebody, why don't we, when a developer builds the, if we. Let a developer build a whole entire campus, why can't they build fire, police and fire there as well, you know, have that part of the, negotiation, things like that, there's gonna be a million competing uses for that. I'm sure there's people in town that are gonna want that whole place to just be a big field, you know, I mean, not to, you know, make jokes, but I think that's gonna be the primary, it's easily accessible, you know, if there's a, you know, major utility outage, they're gonna be able to move quickly on it, you know, versus, you know, if they're in a further pocket of town, it's gonna take a lot more time, and that's the thing. If we put DPW or even police and fire, their response times are gonna shrink, you know, be longer, you know, and at the same time, with them going to other areas, it's gonna be more manpower, more time on the road versus actually being productive in the work area. There's those hidden costs that we don't really cap, you know, those are soft costs that we don't know about.
But I thought this was great.
Okay,
Really, you did a great job.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, really, and thank
Linda
Linda,
helped out.
And very thoughtful.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
okay, so it gives us a little bit of time on the clock, because we are scheduled till 4.
We are?
We are. Nobody else?
Friday.
So what's the sense of the group? Yeah?
Sure.
So just big picture, so today's what, the 6th? So we have,
The
our
20th is the
report,
next one.
and then we have, the consolidation report. And then we're sticking everything together, and then we have a meeting on the 20th. Is that how the month?
So the goal is, if you do it, we start with the fire police report now, let's see how far we get. Do the remainder on the 20th, do the consolidation on the 20th, so we have at the end of the 20th, all reports together. And then Rudy and I will consolidate that into one big thing.
So it sounds like we really should dig into.
So, and you're
Yeah,
coming
we
to
have
the
to,
select
yeah.
board on the 23rd,
Yeah,
and this will be, yeah, to
yeah,
the.
so we should use it, just a heads up, the executive session that is on it is mainly to approve minutes. So that will be very quick.
Yep, good.
So we can use let's say
Good.
35-ish minutes.
So a question before we go into executive session, so on public communication and public consultation. What are your thoughts on that and timing and? I mean, obviously the select board presentation, but this first. I mean, all these are public, but what's your outreach?
I think we will have to start the outreach after we have all of this together. At the moment, it was for the longest time premature to communicate any
But there,
early stuff.
you're saying there should be a phase 1 outreach plan.
Well,
Oh, I guess I'm confused, why does this committee need public outreach?
yeah, I think there's
Well, I think the select board.
there's a
It
certain,
was part of the charge.
yeah.
I mean, there
It
are a
was,
lot of
I think
moving
it might
parts
have to
here, a lot
revisit.
of public interest, you know.
I just don't think we have time, do it.
So the question
That's
is
the
what,
question, that's the discussion for the select board.
I think
and-
so.
and
Yeah.
I just want to know your.
I think it's,
On
the
the
question
23rd.
is, what is the expectation? If
Yes.
it's kind of informational,
Or-
that you just
yeah.
inform the affected committees, FinCom, select board, or whoever act committee or whatever, that's one thing. Another one, if you want to run a whole survey, I think you have to run surveys in the working streams of that and see what the public is thinking about certain areas.
Yes.
Should I share? Do you want to share it?
I am ready to share here.
Okay.
Great. Okay, okay.
All right, there we go. I'm getting a little feedback.
My audio carried through here, right?
That's good.
Yeah, it works. Okay, so this is a little bit of a different approach than what the Public Works group just did, working from the report. And then eventually to a deck. We have a deck, but we haven't finished the report, which is always handy because it means that the level of detail doesn't have to belie the degree to which we've all looked at a draft report. So hopefully this will be relatively straightforward to walk through. We will have a more detailed report, but this is a little bit lighter on details. So public safety subgroup, final report summary, overview. So this corresponds to the table of contents that each of the subgroups will have in their report. So number one, a review of the land use working group and the subgroup charge. Number two, public safety facilities in Concord, just an introduction and context. Number three, existing conditions of those facilities. Number four, future needs. Number five, peer benchmarking. Number six, identifying and evaluating options. That's obviously the main focus of the conversation today. Discussion and trade-offs amongst those options. Recommendations to the land use working group and the select board, and then next steps. So number one, I'll go through these really quickly because this is at this point pretty routine. So what was the charge of the land use working group? Really looking at municipal facilities in the context of these opportunity parcels, namely MCI, Peabody, Ripley, etc. And the public safety facilities subgroup included 3 land use working group members, as well as we have relied upon the public safety officials, the fire chief, the police chief, the deputies, and so forth. They've been incredibly helpful, and we've been working on this since September, running up into the end of last month. In terms of public safety facilities in Concord, I think obviously this group, we all know what we're talking about, but just for any members of the public listening in, we're looking at 3 main facilities. We're looking at the fire station on Main Street in West Concord, as well as the combination fire headquarters and police headquarters on Walden Street in Concord Center. You can see the 2 images thereof. And just for a little bit of context, the West Concord Fire Station, so that everybody can just remind yourselves where it is. It's at 1201 Main Street in West Concord. The current site area, which is really kind of the square of this, or rectangular of this parcel, is fairly small. It's about 1/3 of an acre. And by the way, if we went backwards on the site into Westgate, there's about an additional 1 1/3 acres available for a potential expanded footprint of a rebuild on that site. And were we to go to the west, there would be an additional 1/2 acre. So none of that land is under town control at this point, but just understanding are the possibilities. And then looking at 209, 213 Walden, as well as 203, by the way, that little storage shed is 203 Walden. That building area is about 20,000 square feet. It's about 50-50 fire and police. And the current site area is about 1.5, of which 1.2 is buildable. So you can see that that sort of quick frame is about 1.2 acres, just so that everybody's feeling the dimensions of the site. So existing conditions and future needs, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of deep detail, but suffice it to say, we understand that the existing conditions, which are in the center column of this table, are the buildings are old, the buildings are in good condition in very small portions of the Walden Street campus, but generally speaking, otherwise in poor condition. There's water damage, the materials are deteriorating. The level of the finishes and fit out in the washrooms and the kitchenettes and so forth is really a generation old. Both sites are somewhat limited in terms of site area as well. There's limited parking. There's an inability to do on-site training. In particular in West Concord, it's a historic building. The bays are currently too small to accommodate I think 2 or 3 generations of recent advances in fire trucks, et cetera. So there are all kinds of challenges there. And then on the Walden Street side, the building itself is a sufficiently generous size with 4 truck bays on the fire side. But there are challenges with regard to the layout relative to the site. It is an awkward configuration, and it's very hard to imagine once you've been through the buildings how it could be reconfigured to look like anything it is we've seen when we've gone to other municipalities. In terms of future needs, we have a fairly good understanding, again, from town officials about what some of the limitations are. And so just to summarize the highlights here, we are short of the space that we need to meet future needs and anticipated future population growth, both with respect to staffing and with respect to equipment. So those are challenges. In particular, we have on the fire side issues with trucks, issues with other kind of specialized equipment storage, gear storage, room for indoor outdoor training. We have challenges with staff wellness facilities, ranging from break rooms to fitness facilities to overnight accommodations. And in our West Concord Fire Station, we have a satellite office for our police staff, and that is a very small room that, to be fair, has seen, or to be polite, has seen better days. On the police side, we have a similar challenge with regard to just general space needs in response to future population growth, but also on the police side, as we looked at other buildings in other towns, we came to recognize that there's a transition ongoing with regard to community safety services. And so there are some spaces that we currently don't have that are part of new approaches to community policing that I think would need to be part of our thinking going forward. In addition, on the police side, we do not have a Sally Port, which is an indoor transfer portal for prisoners. We don't have indoor vehicle storage. We had our new dispatch manager come with us on a couple of tours, and he was very clear about what the future of dispatch planning looks like and how that might fit into our future planning for these facilities. Some of the other towns, not that we need to have what other towns have, but it's interesting to see that some of them have their own gun ranges internally. They also have upgraded fitness, wellness, and all of those other sorts of things. In getting to that very quick summary table, we had lots of terrific input. So I just want to highlight that both the police chief and the fire chief provided us with needs assessment reports that will be appended to our longer report, as well as heat maps and other kinds of information about response times, which helped us as we were evaluating different scenarios. Then we did some peer benchmarking. So we wanted to understand what it is that other towns that are nearby, and in particular, other towns that were similar sized, similar kind of growth patterns, what they were doing. And so one of the things that we quickly surveilled without even having to go out on site visits, which I'll report about next, is that most neighboring towns tend to have a fire headquarters and or a police headquarters, sometimes in the same building. If it's a larger city, they weren't. But they tend to be in a central location, and the fire subs, they would build a smaller fire substation in areas where they were having marked new growth. Concord is a little bit different in that we do have a fairly bifurcated population base. So we have a town center in Concord Center and a town center in West Concord. So this kind of centralized approach to facility provision may not necessarily work as well for us. Most of the peers that we looked at are building new rather than renovating, which was something we came into this study questioning, not so much on the West Concord side, because that building simply is too old to be retrofitted in a meaningful way, but we were optimistic that maybe we could do something with the Walden Street Station. Again, while we don't have a definitive answer because we actually need an expert to do a cost and feasibility study on Walden Street, our instincts are telling us based on visits that it's likely going to be very difficult to retrofit. And when we looked at peer municipalities, nobody was renovating. Everybody was building new because I think the standards have changed so much. The technology has changed so much. So that's something that we learned. The other thing that we learned, and Mark and Sven and I were all, when we were walking through these buildings, we think they're really overbuilding relative to anticipating future needs. So we felt that there was a lot of underutilized space. And clearly they were getting advice from their expert consultants who were advising them on the building design and capacity, that they should build to that level, but that was a question mark that we had because we really were curious about size relative to the efficiency of the current efficiency of the buildings. So those were kind of our key takeaways. And then we did some site visits. So the subgroup members and town officials visited facilities in neighboring towns, both police and fire, headquarters scale and substation scale. So we, at this point, have been to Lexington and Natick. We had some others on the books that we made yet complete. But here's just some images of us, out there taking a look at things. And even, with some of these larger images, these are from Natick, which is a sub, it's not their fire headquarters. You can see that, I mean, I want to say, I'm seeing 4 bays, but for some reason, was that 5 bays?
It's 5
It's 5, right? It's a sub with 5 bays and look at the height. Right now, it was a clear site, so they were building from scratch. But, the idea that the modern stations are incredibly different from what it is that we currently have was very apparent as we toured. And certainly, we've got some different pictures here, but the staff areas were very pleasant. The overnight accommodations were very pleasant, but really the action was here, which is where the equipment storage, the trucks that were available, so on and so forth. This is the Lexington Police Station. So this is in contrast to the fire station pictures. I've got plenty of pictures, but I'm just trying to show the highlights here. You can see that in Lexington, they have indoor vehicle storage. They have a Sally port here, which is the central picture. You can see that this is a very up-to-date dispatch terminal that I believe actually had 2 more screens as you came around the edge. So it's a 10-screen station and they had multiple stations. You can also see they had a rifle range, a modern fitness facility, so on and so forth. And, obviously these are brand new builds. They look spectacular compared to what we have, but it does make us think about what it is to provide modern, updated facilities for our town. Also just wanted to highlight a few of the metrics of those 2 stations. I'm actually just going to do Lexington here. So here's Lexington's fire department headquarters. And just so you can think about numbers. So they obviously higher population. This one opened in 2020. It's about 26,000 square feet. This is just their fire headquarters. They also have another sub, but this is their headquarters. Their site utilization is pretty intense here. It's about a 1-acre site. And you can see that really the only remaining parts that aren't building or driveway is just a little bit of parking at the rear, right? So fairly intensely used. Yes.
And on that point, I think both Framingham and Lexington were pretty explicit that they are short of parking. They have boats, they have all sorts of equipment, they have customer parking, staff parking, so Lexington's parking should probably be, twice as big as that if they had the land, the parking would be significantly larger.
Agreed, and it's in, not quite in the center of Lexington in terms of the retail areas, but a lot of the parking at the rear is in swing parking arrangements for other uses. So sometimes people who are coming to the fire station can use it. I'm sure employees use that on occasion. And the cost here, just trying to get a sense of costing, this was about 20 million when it opened in 2020. Fire stations tend to be a little bit less expensive than police stations because they have those very large open floor areas. So this was about $770 a square foot in 2020 dollars. Then looking at the police headquarters in Lexington as well, this opened 2 years later, so they also did their new construction recently and sequentially. This is about 35,000 square feet compared to the 26,000 for the fire headquarters. And the current site area, again, is still pretty intensively used, not quite as intensively building area relative to site area, because they don't have the footprint for the fire trucks and the driveway for the fire trucks. So they're sitting on about 1.2 acres here, and a fairly rectangular site. That building was 35 million in 2022, so it's about $1,000 a square foot. And where was it? Were we in Natick where they said they're running
1,100.
1,100 for that substation? I don't have the costing information in this deck, but they were running $1,100 a square foot to build a fire station in 2025. Now, hard to know if that included some land acquisition costs that might have been a little higher. We don't really know, but we do know that the numbers are trending upward. in part because of, changes in the construction industry, material supply, tariffs, you name it. We also did, just by way of an exhibit, we're not gonna go into the numbers, but we did do some benchmarking about building size and building costs. Many of you have seen these slides before, but this is where we got the $800 square foot number for building new fire and new police stations as of 2024, 2025. So again, that's just another example with, with some summary numbers at the bottom. So then we moved into identifying and evaluating our options. We considered 16 different options, which we'll show you on the next slide. Our main criteria were functional efficiency. These are public safety facilities, so they have to provide public safety. That's their first and foremost need. And so we wanted to evaluate them on their ability to provide essential services for fire, of course, measured in response time, police not as beholden to response time, their ability to provide the appropriate space for equipment, be that vehicles, storage, other specialized items, the ability to provide training spaces, whether that's a gun range, a tower for practicing hose work for the fire department, meeting rooms and so forth, and then additionally staff wellness, break rooms, fitness, overnight accommodations and so forth. So functional efficiency was one set of criteria. The next was cost relative to building lifespan, including sustainability components. The third was location and land acquisition. So thinking about the location of existing buildings in particular. And if we look at other sites, the land acquisition cost of moving to other sites, but with a pretty big asterisk here, because public safety facilities present some kinds of land use issues, sirens, movement in the middle of the night, et cetera, that are already absorbed into existing locations. So that existing locations, if they can be reutilized, tend to present some advantages from a land use planning point of view. So just pointing that out. And then the final set of criteria was around project delivery, project phasing, managing service disruptions, and so forth. Now, of course, there's other criteria, but these are just sort of the highlights. So when we think about our 16 options, we have four main categories and then 4 options within each of those. And the happy news is that we eliminate some of these fairly quickly. So I'm just going to orient you to the options, and then I'm going to get you where the committee sits now by telling you where we have eliminated options. So the first category is the fire station in West Concord. So there are 4 options there, and you'll see this pattern as we move through the other ones. 1A is status quo. So is there any way we can keep that building, keep it going, put it on life support, throw some money at it, and get another 5 to 10 years out of that? So that's the status quo option. 1B, is there any way you can renovate that building and make it still work for 5, 10, 15 years? And by the way, a little foreshadowing, both of those options turn out to be no, they get eliminated fairly quickly. 1C and 1D, this involves building a new fire headquarters on the existing Main Street site in West Concord, but acknowledging that just based on the simple images I showed you about the site area that's required for a new larger scale headquarters building, there would need to be land acquisition in the vicinity of the existing site in order to make this particular option feasible, right? So we'll come back and we'll look at some pictures. One of the things you'll note as well here that we're talking about a fire headquarters. So one of the essential findings of the committee that we'll come back to at the end is that if we are going to build a new fire headquarters, it ought to be in West Concord. 2/3 of the population of the town currently live south of Route 2, which is the recent estimate. And Megan's looking at me quizzically, which makes me wonder if that's data correct, because I figured you would know.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so we've been given that number, and then we have new projects and new population growth anticipated in West Concord. So it would make sense that if we're going to build a new fire headquarters, a larger new fire station, that would be somewhere in West Concord. So 1C is build that new fire headquarters in West Concord and build it on the Main Street site. 1D is build that new fire headquarters in West Concord, but build it on an alternate site. One of the things you will find about our subgroup and the identification of alternate sites is it's very different from Public Works. Because we're bound by response times. Response times govern so much of the decision-making around identifying alternate sites that really needs to be done by a specialized consultant. And we will come back to that issue later. Okay, so that's kind of the rhythm. Number 2 is the existing fire station in Concord Center. So again, we have the status quo. How long can we keep that thing going by just doing basic operations, funding new small capital improvements? Number 2 is, can we renovate Walden Street and convert it into a fire substation, meaning it would be a smaller station that was servicing mainly Concord Center. By the way, just like grouping number 1, status quo and renovation of Walden. Status quo we know is probably going to come off the table. It's just, in 5 to 10 years, we don't see throwing more money at that building. 2B, renovating Walden Street, that's a big question mark because we're relatively certain it's not going to be feasible to renovate it at a cost that makes sense. But again, we do want an expert consultant to come in and make that final determination so we can be absolutely sure, because we're running on instinct here, right? Running on instinct in very small amounts of data. So then the options about new building on the Concord Center Fire Station are to, if we can't keep the existing building or renovate it, then we tear it down and we build a new fire sub on the current Walden Street site, or we build a new fire sub on an alternate site in Concord Center. Just as an example, there's a pump station a little bit further up the street on Walden Street that has, some additional land. Could that possibly be a site? That obviously would not dramatically change response times. But again, we're going to leave the determination and identification of alternate sites to an expert consultant. Grouping number 3 is the police station. Looks pretty much like grouping number 2 because obviously they're in the same building. So the status quo, again, we don't think the status quo is a feasible option for the Walden Street building. We will defer on the renovation final decision to an expert, but our instinct is that that's not going to be a feasible renovation. So again, we're looking at possibly building a new police building, either a headquarters on the current Walden Street site or somewhere else, anywhere in town. Does not have to be in Concord Center, does not have to be in West Concord. It's not under the same sort of decision rules as the fire station. It also, in terms of like fire, when you have a fire headquarters and you have a sub, there's a logic there. The police, we probably only need one main building, and then we would put an office for the police to use in the substation of the new fire station, which was a very typical arrangement that we saw as we moved around looking at some of these facilities. So if the police headquarters is in Concord Center, then put an office in the new fire station in West Concord so that the police have a satellite place that they can stop. And then finally, in terms of our other options, we can do some combinations here. So the idea here is to explore, are there places where we could conceivably have some kind of economy of scale? So could we take the fire headquarters, the larger fire building, and combine it with the police headquarters in West Concord, either on the existing site in West Concord, although that starts to look pretty tight, right? Or on an alternate site in West Concord. So there are a number of towns that put fire headquarters and police headquarters into the same building, but there are just as many that don't. Right, so there's no rhyme or reason there. I think it comes down to what fits on a site. We could also combine the police headquarters with a fire substation, right? So if there was room, for example, on the existing Walden Street site, tear the building down, build a new police headquarters with, sort of a configuration that makes sense, and then put the fire sub on the remainder of the parcel, right? So playing around with whether that works at Walden, or could that happen, by the way, on that pumping station site up the street. The third option in the other category is to do just standalone buildings wherever they need to be, right? So 3 brand new builds, a fire headquarters, probably in West Concord, a new police headquarters, anywhere we want it to be, and a new fire sub, likely in Concord Center. And anywhere we wanted it to be. We also looked at 4D, which is the idea of creating one central campus and having everything be in one central campus. That fell off the table pretty quickly because it's simply, mainly from the fire side, you can't get the response times you need in a town that is geographically so big in a central campus. So those are our 16 options. We, for each option, considered pros and cons. We have a detailed table sort of that looks at each option. We'll include them in the report, but we're not going to go over them here. I think it'd just be a distraction. In all cases, we eliminated the status quo. And in the cases where renovation of Walden Street was an option, we've kind of said not fully eliminated, but likely to be eliminated. But again, waiting for the expert fire and build a police consultant to come in, and they can actually very quickly, I think, look at Walden and help us make a decision there. Because we don't want to take Walden off the table in terms of renovating it if there's any possibility that it might work. And then finally, we identified the remaining preferred options, and we also identified a priority or a sense of urgency. So I'll walk you through the preferred options list, but keep in mind that this is our order of what we think is most important. The most important thing is to immediately and as quickly as possible increase our fire services capabilities in West Concord. We simply do not have a building that makes sense. We don't have equipment that makes sense. We've got all kinds of new population either on their way or coming with MCI. So that needs to be our biggest priority. The second priority is the police headquarters. So the police are in desperate need of a new building as well. So that's the second priority. And the third priority is the Concord Center Fire Substation, because that part of the building on Walden Street, that probably we could keep going, and help with not having to deal with service disruption in the fire realm while we're dealing with West Concord, because that part of the station can probably function for a while longer. So that's our recommended order. And then you can see this is the list. Once we take some of those things, we grade out basically everything that doesn't function to come to, sorry, I have those in there. This is our sort of our functioning list right now. So for West Concord, build new on the Main Street site or build new on an alternate site. That's our highest priority. Probably need about 20,000 square feet. Cost estimate, if we're talking about $1,000 a square foot, $20 to $30 million maybe by the time we get there, right? And by the way, we're really spitballing numbers here. So no idea. I don't think they're too low, but I think it might be a little high to say 30. So we'll see. Then in Concord Center, building a new sub. This is our third priority. Probably only need 10,000 square feet there. Cost estimate then at $1,000 a square foot, 10 to 15 million. With a shorter delivery window because it's a smaller build. And then the police station, this is our second priority. Probably don't need, if Lexington has 35, we could probably get due with 25. Again, really just pulling numbers out of the air here. But we say maybe 25,000 square feet, cost estimate 25 to 35 million, also a 3 to 5 year delivery. And it really depends. If we use an existing site, the delivery is going to be faster. But if we have to go out and do land acquisition, it's going to be slow. And then the other options, I didn't price the combinations, but you really just add things together and you get a sense of what the cost would be, right? Because a new fire headquarters and a new police headquarters, there's going to be some overlap in terms of meeting rooms and so forth, but generally speaking, it's additive. There isn't a lot of economy of scale. So just add 20,000 for the new fire headquarters, 25 for the new police headquarters, and just assume they're in the same building. Maybe there's an efficiency factor of 10% that you could reduce, but it doesn't really change our thinking. And so now we get to our findings and recommendations. So these are we've really tried to reduce so that we can be very, very clear. The first thing that we want to communicate in our report is that our public safety facilities are in urgent need of upgrading, absolutely urgent. The second is that we think that the priorities are new fire HQ in West Concord, new police HQ, and then a sub, dealing with the sub issue in Concord Center. And then when we think about building these three things, our recommendation for the fire headquarters in West Concord is to really try and see if we can make that existing Main Street site work through land acquisition, because it's going to be difficult to find another site in West Concord that is central relative to response times, that also will be able to quickly and readily absorb the negative externalities of having a fire station in an existing neighborhood. I mean, the only place that where you could probably absorb that was Rob was mentioning, you know, did we think about MCI at the outset? Because it's a new build, so you can build it into the expectations of people who buy units there. And the challenge with MCI for fire is response times because of traffic and, you know, you name it. So we would encourage in the next steps that they start with the Main Street site and then move out to considering other sites if the Main Street site doesn't work. We've looked at a few configurations and we think there's some possibilities there if we can do some adjacent land acquisition. For the new police headquarters, that can be anywhere in town. But we do think that the existing Walden Street site it has potential. I mean, we've got the land, it's not in a bad location. If we built a completely new building there, do we have enough land cover? Not clear. I think we need a consultant to look at the site. It's a weird site. You'll remember that when we looked at all the other buildings, they're sort of really quite rectangular, which there's a logic for fire stations, I get it. But for the police stations, you got a little bit more flexibility, but I still wonder if the geometry of that site is simply too narrow to get, you know, the kind of configuration that a you know, modern police headquarters would have. So, you know, look at the existing site on Walden Street and then begin to look at alternate sites. And then finally, with regard to the new fire sub in Concord Center, that probably makes a lot of sense to try and retain on the Walden Street site. So we'd like them to kind of think about that. We'd like the consultant to think about that before moving on to other options, because if we can use existing property that doesn't have a good market use as something else, which the Walden Street site does not necessarily have a great alternative use, then it makes sense to make use of it. So this is what the set of recommendations looks like in slide form. And then finally, home stretch here, next steps. So when I said that we're running out of runway here, our committee has pretty much done everything that we can do with the information that we have available to us and the expertise that we have. So we would like to encourage the land use working group to make a recommendation to the select board to establish a dedicated public safeties building committee and to not wait until the end of the land use working group timeline, which is the summer. I think this committee could be established sooner rather than later, and that the first thing that this new committee should do is get out there and hire one of the consultants. We have all the names of these folks because we've talked to everybody now. It's going to be probably $100,000 to $150,000 study, but they will be able to look at all of the locations, all of the sites, evaluate the response times, make recommendations on the Walden building, and come up with a whole strategy for moving us forward with our public safety buildings. And then the second next step is to advise the land use working group and the select board that based on our work, the public safety subgroup believes that the opportunity sites, which again, going all the way back to the first slide, was one of the points of creating the land use working group. We've reviewed the opportunity sites and we've eliminated from consideration MCI Concord, 2229 Main, Keyes, Peabody, Ripley, and Harvey Wheeler.
Thank you.
I will not take any questions.
We'll take a breath.
Yeah, take a breath. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask you about Harvey Wheeler with police? If Harvey Wheeler were available, for police. Combining a spitball with a curveball here. Because, you know, under the municipal equation, you know, that might be vacant, it might be, he might move out of there. Would that be a suitable facility with a parking?
Actually, I think for police, you could probably throw it back into the mix. It really comes down to what else is going to be at Harvey Wheeler. It's not a super large site and they can't just be necessarily like on the first floor, fully spread out. I don't know.
Have you seen the basement of Harvey Wheeler? I mean, there's a lot of space there.
No, more,
Says
that's
a
one of the things
Just
that we saw like the, what, Judith, what was the name of that area where you drive in with the prisoner or
Or
whatever?
the Sally Port.
So the Sally Port was a big piece. There was a lot of, sort of parking, so there's more parking than I would have imagined in a modern police station. So I don't see how Harvey Wheeler's gonna work unless you're knocking down a lot of Harvey Wheeler.
Which you can't do.
So we have,
Why 2229 Main though? Why was that eliminated? from-
So, we were thinking, so I will say that I think a lot of our recommendations had to do with thinking about fire. So it's.
No, but I'm talking about police.
But
Police.
for police, I think for police, honestly, there's a lot of opportunities to look around town. So it may be that we should amend that to say eliminated for consideration for fire purposes. Maybe that makes a little sense, I don't know.
None
I
of
thought I
these-
heard you say that the location for police wasn't as important
Yeah,
as fire. But
It's
so
not as good
how
of a
important, I
response,
don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think it would probably be tricky to be that far out relative, I mean, even a satellite office then wouldn't necessarily be.
Particularly,
real.
you have like the new apartments in Maynard, you have the new 40B on Thoreau. It's gonna be a busy place. And none of the police officials we spoke to had any enthusiasm for that location.
No, I got the feeling they would love to be either somewhere in a, if you had to sort of draw a ring road, I won't say buffers now. You have to draw a ring, around the intersection of Route 2 and Main Street. They'd like to be somewhere within a half a mile, so that they're kind of central.
So sort of those swag costs that you had, right, for different options. You had $1,000 per square foot for rent, but I know that some of the options included land that we own, some included land we have to buy. Did that 1,000 include, what was the assumption you made? That was just built?
Yeah.
Okay.
So do we, if we were able to, so for example, move the new police down the street on Walden, could we renovate the current fire police for fire, or is that not an option?
So in terms of being a firehead police, so you say, just as a thought,
Just like so.
possibly, right? And this is why we don't want to take renovation of Walden completely off the table.
Okay.
What's weird about Walden, what's weird about the station is, and I think most of us have been through it, right? It's the layout of the building. It is weirdly configured in terms of where the hallways are, it's got staircases. So by the time you really have to reconfigure the interior, I don't know that the cost savings relative to a new build will be there, but this is, these
but
consultants.
they already
figure that.
in the bases and one of them, they already had to cut something on the height.
Yes.
That's right, yeah, for the
To
truck.
ensure
the fire
they can
truck,
get
fire,
truck in.
so the truck
Sooner or
ladder.
later, you're running the same issue to what we have.
Increase the ceiling height.
But you could put our old trucks from Westcon
So-
in there.
Just a matter of time is,
I did wanna just say one thing. With this whole consideration, and I don't, it's a lack of information, do we have an emergency operations center?
we have right now.
Okay, do we have a backup location, part of that? So just a question, that's just,
No, because this came up, with, I can't, is it Steve, the guy who's the dispatcher?
Agent, yeah,
He's terrific, right, really knowledgeable.
David, yeah.
But he was also talking about the need, exactly as you're saying, Rob, for a backup emergency operations center. So that would definitely be part of the planning, but that was something we
Yeah, sure.
heard like a month ago for the
Yeah.
first time.
Well, the town's contemplating sort of a regional emergency, and that would probably require.
Right.
That has to go into
Yeah,
the,
that's in your,
it has to go into the consultants doing.
okay.
So we were able to get some floor plans, and I think that I was surprised, and I think the public will be surprised. At the amount of square footage that, 2 rooms of that we're going through. For the public space room, which is used for a crisis center. As well as sort of their brains of video screens and technology. And how sort of impressive and somewhat large, those, I never imagined, floor plan for a police station.
I think that this dedicated building committee, their first job after hiring somebody is gonna be to go and visit all these stations, right, and see what we saw.
So we will reserve another 15 to 20 minutes of discussion at February
Yeah.
20th. So that we can just go through this a little bit more.
Great.
And then your team is slotted. Alan Reed, I see you have your hand up. Very quick, very short. What's your question?
Harlan Reed, 83 Wits End, member of the Finance Committee, speaking on my own behalf. Judith, your plans and recommendations seem to be driven by anticipated population growth. What data studies do you have that you're relying on that estimate population growth and over what time period?
Did they?
So I think, Carlin, I should probably be more clear. It's a shift in population distribution. Away from sort of Concord Center towards West Concord. And actually, I believe you were the one who gave us that very helpful piece of information based on the town voting data that said that 2/3 of the population was now living south of Route 2, which I found very informative. And then, of course, we have, MCI, the 240Bs, et cetera. So it's thinking about population redistribution as well as growth.
But one of the things we talked about early on, and I think it became a cost issue as far as getting a consultant, is exactly what Carl was talking about, is that exactly getting some more granular population projection than to backfill in these recommendations to make them.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's nothing.
Okay, let's reserve that to the next.
Yeah, we should.
Great question, Carl.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, with that, you just have one minor thing to do, on the executive session. So, I would like to entertain a motion to enter the executive session under MGL C-33A, paragraph 21A6 to consider the purchase, exchange, lease or value of real property as the chairs declared that an open meeting may have the detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the public body and not to return to open session.
So moved.
Second. Okay, given we have nobody online anymore, probably can do.
We need a roll call.
Do the roll call, okay, Rob Almeida,
Aye.
Keith Berkman.
Aye.
Mary Hartman.
Aye.
Judy Long,
Hi.
Mark Martinez,
Yes.
Sam Weber, aye.